Staffing, it's unique because you're sharing information about your employees with your client. Right. How are they managing, making sure, they're complying with all the privacy restrictions and likes.
We are going back to back today, so lots of content, and I hope your audience at home, you're having fun and really enjoy being together today with Ben Ebbink.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining the show today.
Of course.
It very much.
Thank you.
Fisher Phillips.
Yes.
And thanks for taking the time.
Of course. Happy to be here. It's a great conference.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun, hasn't it?
Yes, very fun.
It's interesting, like the traffic along the floor maybe has been a little bit less than in former years.
Yeah.
But I find the quality of conversations we're having are really high quality.
Really good people you want to talk to, making good connections. So it's an excellent
it's
conference.
Been fantastic. It's great. Well, again, thank you for being here.
Sure.
So how did you get into staffing? Talk to me a little bit about your offering to the staffing industry and how you fell into this.
So I work for a law firm called Fisher Phillips. We're a nationwide labor and employment law firm. And we're in most states nationwide. So I head up our staffing practice.
Got it.
And we traditionally do a lot of work in the PEO and the staffing industry. Okay. And we recently moved those two practice areas apart in the firm.
Really?
Because
separate focus.
And PEO. Okay. Because staffing is unique. There are some commonalities between staffing and PEO and other, workforce solutions business models, but there are so many nuances that are specific to staffing. So it really made sense to move that and give it the attention it deserves as an industry of its own. So I head up that practice group. We do everything from start to finish: contract review, litigation, compliance. My other hat I wear in the firm is I'm head of our government relations practice group.
Right.
And so I spend a lot of time in DC. I'm based in California, Sacramento, California, but I spend about a month in DC.
Got it.
Which has been very busy of late and lots of developments. So my background before that, I worked for the California legislature in a policy committee role for about 15 years. So I really specialize in compliance issues, all the new state and local and sometimes federal laws that staffing companies and other folks have to comply with. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Excellent. So you're based out of Sacramento.
Yes.
But you're a nationwide firm.
Right.
Do you have a kind of geographic leaning West Coast?
No, we're everywhere. The firm originally started in Atlanta, Georgia in the 1930s. And we've really branched out to there. So we're spread, I think we're in 36, 37 different states. There is a lot of work in California. Being an employment lawyer, California is, it's a ripe environment for that. So we do have a lot of growth in California. We have 6 offices in California. About 200 of our 700 and so attorneys are in California because there's just so much litigation and other legal issues. But we're across the board: New York, Chicago, everywhere. So
you primarily handling relationship management, and then and things move downstream. So
I do a lot of that. I do a lot of compliance work for both staffing firms and PEOs.
Okay.
This new law came into effect. What does it mean for you and your clients? I'm not a litigator by practice, so when it comes to litigation, then I bring in folks from our firm who handle the litigation.
Got a nice full bench.
Yes, we've got everybody who can help on immigration issues and privacy issues, litigation issues. We've got it covered.
Great. One-stop shop.
That's right.
Legal advisory for staffing agencies.
That's right.
So that's great. Well, it's nice to know about you and your background and what you're doing. That's wonderful. You see a lot in staffing. We are on the Growth Game podcast.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about pattern matching growth. As a lawyer, you're going to get excited when you see a client growing. So what are some of the things that you see? Maybe the top 2 or 3 indicators that you're going, listen, this staffing agency is going to succeed. It's going to grow. Love to hear what your insights are.
So a couple different thoughts. I mean, from a legal perspective, what I see leading to growth is staffing firms being very ahead of the game when it comes to compliance.
Right. Not just sitting back waiting.
Don't wait. And I know that's difficult in a growth industry like staffing or others where it's a lot of emphasis on sales bringing clients in the door. Sometimes compliance takes a back seat.
Yeah.
And that can be unfortunate. So it's a good sign when I see a firm, a staffing firm approaching us or another law firm wanting to get ahead of the curve, making sure they're doing everything right, avoid problems beforehand, which does cost a little bit of money to do that.
Right.
But it costs you a whole lot less than just sitting back, waiting for the litigation to come in and the problems to arise.
Right.
So when I see that, when a firm is reaching out on that, that's an indicator to me that this firm is being strategic and smart, and is going to.
That a lot of your clients grow.
They do grow because they're saving money by being compliant up front rather than paying large settlements and large attorney's fees handling litigation. They can plug that money into growth.
Ben, that is the first time I've ever heard pattern matching growth by hire your lawyer.
That's right.
But I love it. It makes absolute strategic sense.
Honestly, I'm shooting myself in the foot a little bit because it's more expensive. You pay more attorney's fees when you're into litigation. But I really
litigators love cleaning up the mess, right?
From a business perspective, I really think it makes a lot of sense too. The other thing I think, we've had a lot of talk at this conference about sort of the downturns in staffing in certain segments. We've had a lot of talk about changes happening at the federal level and how that may impact certain staffing firms, more than others, particularly those that work with federal agencies, federal contractors, some of the concerns about DEI initiatives.
Right.
What I think leads me to, realize a firm is growing. I do think there's something to be said for diversification of your offering as a staffing firm.
Interesting.
It can be risky, I think, to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And I've talked to several CEOs at the conference, and they said, we have a government federal contractor, segment. We staff federal contractors. That's very uncertain right now.
Yeah.
We know that may take a hit with the Trump administration.
Destroy your paycheck.
Yeah. Tomorrow that contract is gone. That agency is cut. But the ones that I think are going to do well and succeed and grow are the ones that said, we understand that, so we've invested over here. We have a healthcare staffing arm or a commercial or light industrial to weather some of these storms.
That's interesting.
So that we're not, putting all our eggs in one basket. So that's one thing I look and appreciate when I see a staffing firm that's sort of got a diverse offering.
Yeah, and I think you're likely seeing more mature staffing agencies, right? So diversification makes sense for them because they've got some breadth.
Right.
It's interesting. Literally, my last guest was saying that one of his pattern matching, things that he's seen is focus.
Yeah.
And staying in one niche. And I think really, I don't think those are disparate answers. I think those answers are correct.
Right.
But it all depends on the size of your executive team, the size of your breadth, because you can diversify as long as you've got the quality talent that is able to really focus on that diversification on that niche.
And I do think it takes time, and a lot of firms start out with one sort of focus.
Right.
You get larger and bigger. You have opportunities for merger and acquisition to bring other lines into your product offering. I don't think it's inconsistent to say there can be growth focusing on one. I think you have to be very strategic about what that area is, and there are areas within staffing that are pretty consistent, and we see easier to absorb some of these ebbs and flows.
Right.
And there are some that, unfortunately, I think, are maybe going to have a rockier road the next couple of years. But it is cyclical, and we do anticipate, despite how hard things may be in a given sector currently, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we do expect to see, further growth down the road.
Makes sense. Curious. So the size of your clients. So many of my audience, I think I have an audience that pretty much permeates most of the staffing industry in the U.S. and Canada, from very, very small, high growth, startups to very, very large companies. But what would be a typical range of size of a staffing agency that can either number one afford and or that you normally see coming into actually hiring a specialist for their legal team? Yeah,
I think it varies. I mean, and I think it varies depending on what the need is. So for the smaller staffing firms that may not have a robust internal HR departments or in-house counsel, we do spend a lot of time on compliance because we're serving that function, helping you to understand what the law is in a given state when you're moving into that market as a staffing firm, what licensing is required, what are the wage and hour rules that you have to comply with there.
Pretty small firm.
That could be a pretty small firm. And so a lot of the time we spend with smaller firms is along those lines.
Got it.
The larger firms generally have a more robust internal HR.
Right.
They do a lot of that in-house. So with larger firms, it often tends to be either managing some of their litigation.
Got it.
And the EPLI claims and others. And so we do a lot of that. They sort of oversee that, but obviously you have a need for outside counsel to handle that. And then I think very specialized niche issues. We have a very robust immigration team at Fisher Phillips. And so a lot of staffing firms, particularly in the travel nurse healthcare issue, have a lot of individualized immigration issues. So and those can be very complex.
Immigration, bringing in nurses, talent into the US.
So some firms may have a good handle on sort of the normal nuts and bolts compliance, wage and hour issues.
Right.
But the immigration piece is really where they need outside expertise. We also do a lot in the privacy space and AI and consumer data privacy, the CCPA in California. That's really almost a different language. You have to understand a different language to, comply in that space. So we have a lot of clients who are, well equipped to handle most issues, but they really need that expertise on a privacy issue, making sure they're being compliant with privacy obligations. Their clients in staffing, it's unique because you're sharing information about your employees with your client. How are they managing, making sure, they're compliant with all the privacy restrictions and like. So, I think it's either, for the larger firms, I think it's either a specialized need or really helping them manage their overall litigation.
Right. So you're selling to staffing agencies. Where do you find your number one or number two ways of connecting and finding new clients?
Yeah, well, I think it's great to meet. What I love about staffing is it's such a diverse industry, and you have people in so many sectors in so many locations. At this conference, this given point in time, I think there's a lot of buzz about a couple of issues, which is great to pivot and talk about with attendees at this conference. But obviously, all the changes in the federal government administration. And so as I said, I chair our government relations practice group as well. So the phone is ringing off the hook constantly from staffing firms and other. The two main questions being immigration, what's happening on the immigration front, how that's going to impact our workforce just generally. And then certainly anybody who use visa workers. And then the second issue is the DEI. And a lot of staffing firms, have invested in DEI. A lot of staffing firms, that's their deliverable. They specialize in helping their clients with DEI programs and creating a more diverse workplace. So lots of questions. What does this all mean? What do we do? A little bit of a panic sense, so speaking a lot about those issues has been great.
Those are definitely the top two issues that I think are on their minds as far as, their legal questions, immigration and DEI.
The other issue that I think has been good to talk about with folks is, and I think every other educational session at this conference has some aspect of AI, right? Like AI, which has a lot of opportunity, obviously, also has some risks. And so we feel fortunate. Our firm has been an early adopter in the use of AI as a law firm. So we use it ourselves, and we have special tools that we've developed. And then we really do, and it's an ever-changing environment. How do you as an employer, as a staffing firm, comply when you're implementing AI with all the myriad state regulations that are coming up? Because unfortunately, this is another area we're not going to see comprehensive federal regulation of AI. Like we saw, very similar to consumer data privacy. This is going to fall to the states, and we've already seen New York, Illinois, Colorado, California. And every state is different, different requirements, and certainly from staffing in a national or state operation, that can be challenging. And especially in this post-COVID environment where many of the employees are remote, working from wherever. You may intend to focus on one geographic area, but you might have an employee who's in California and falls under the California Consumer Privacy Act, or the California's pending AI regulation. And figuring all that out can be complex. So it's interesting to see, because there's you see people's eyes light up in these examples of AI uses in staffing and how it can help in recruiting and sales and all these amazing things you can do to be more efficient. But at the same time, there's a lot of concern and just wanting to do it carefully, do it right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Most of the firms I talk to are still in the kind of evaluating uses, wanting to move slowly,
just educating themselves.
Right. What are the parameters? What are the regulations we have to live in before leaping full scale into AI? But it's coming. It's going to transform the industry, the staffing industry, and it's here. It's not a fad. That's gonna we're not going to be talking about something else in 3 years. It's still going to be AI.
This is it. It's going to be the largest transformational movement. I think it's going to be larger and way more transformation than even the internet was.
I agree. I absolutely agree. A lot of people are comparing it to that. I think it's going to be
so much more dynamic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So great. Well, let's talk about maybe this last thing before we wrap up.
Sure.
Curious to see what you're seeing in regards to some of the push for regulation in the workers' comp area. Workers' comp in California has been a dynamic and challenging situation. There's been so much kind of gray and black market issues surrounding staffing and PEO specifically as it relates to the temporary staffing industry. What are you seeing, and what do you actually see coming down from the legislature and really the cops? Are they going to actually start doing their job and closing up some of these bad actors? I'm really curious to
see a few things in California. I mean, generally in California, we say once about every 10 years, we have a monumental workers' comp reform in California, which completely upends the system. So we haven't seen that in a few years, and I don't think that's coming, in the next year or two. There's always a few workers' compensation issues that the legislature is grappling with. What we hear from the regulators is continued concern, confusion about the gray areas. We don't know what this business model is.
Right.
They call themselves one thing, but really maybe it's something else.
Is it a PEO?
Is it a PEO? Is it a staffing company?
What is it?
And that concern is exacerbated in California, for example, because we don't have comprehensive regulation of the PEO industry. We don't even have a definition in statute of what a PEO is. So that makes it very difficult from the regulators to sort of draw lines, create rules that are intended to apply to PEOs or staffing companies when they have a hard time determining who's who.
Got it.
So the PEO industry is, hopefully, and I'm insisting with that, having a conversation about bringing some regulation, standard definition of the PEO industry in California, like we have in most other states. I think 39 or 40 other states clearly define that. Even though that's targeted at PEO, I think that's going to have some benefits to everybody by just drawing clear lines for both the industry and the regulators to determine not just what somebody calls themselves, but how they're acting. This means you are doing this, and gives them. And I think that's a good, point of commonality. The industry has concerns, both staffing and PEO, about these gray areas and people calling themselves one thing or the other. The regulators have that concern too. It's hard for them to enforce, make sure workers' comp policies are written correctly in this regulatory vacuum.
First, before it fixes this very difficult workers' comp issue.
Well, I think they'll come hand in hand. And I think, as that conversation progresses, I think workers' comp will be part of that conversation. But I even think merely having clear definitions and lines in California, even if it doesn't specifically address workers' comp, is going to have that added benefit of making things more clear, making the regulators understand who the parties are. Because it's hard when you have a state that doesn't even define some of these terms to regulate and make sure everything's
That's
going better.
Perspective. I didn't realize that. Well, excellent. Thank you, Ben, so much for being
happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. That's another wrap, audience, for the Growth Game podcast. See you soon. We've got more live broadcasts coming up.